Hello everyone, welcome back to Naomi's Bookshelf for Bookmas Day 12. Here I am announcing my new series called Timeless Tomes because I am going to face my fear. And my fear is kind of a giant one as it's about giant books. All of these are so big and so terrifying and I need to read them because they've been on my shelves for far too long, and that's not even a whole stack. Like I have, I think, another 5 or 6 giant ones that I could not or did not want to carry in that little mini pickup. I am going to read one of this stack of books, maybe not all of these books, but one of these books every 2 months. And I'm going to put up a discussion video about it because I feel like classics you can discuss a lot more in depth. And my format is going to be where I will discuss non-spoilers, things I think that are important to the book, and then I'll go into spoilers and we'll use the discussions as a big, or the comments as a big discussion. So that is my general plan for reading these books. Maybe you want to read along with me. I'll tell you in advance what my next classic is if you want to join in on the discussion, like a mini book club if you're interested in these giant classics. But this is more to keep me accountable because honestly, I am scared. I have a fear of picking up giant books and dedicating myself to it to not like it, which is ridiculous. I should pick it up because I want to, and then maybe I won't like it, but at least I'll have tried it. So I'm going to talk to you about the book that I read and finished in November or October, which is Vanity Fair. This is my first book of the series, and I'll be discussing this one in detail with you. However, if you're interested in joining it for next month, the next book or the next time in January, it will be Anna Karenina. So it is divided into 8 parts and I am enjoying the audiobook of it already, but I do need to continue in it and this is a push to get me there. So that is my next book if you want to join me on my Timeless Tomes journey. Now, if you have any suggestions for tomes that I should pick up, I mean, I already own several, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on which tomes I should pick up, ones that are really interesting or great, because that will also make me pick certain ones over the others. So we're gonna just go straight into why I think Vanity Fair is a great classic, or why discussions about this book. So for the beginning, I'm gonna tell you just about the plot. So this follows Amelia Sedley and Becky Sharp as they are living life. They meet in a boarding school and then they leave the boarding school together. They both go to Amelia's house, and Amelia is a wealthy girl. Her parents are like very well, they have a lot of money. Her brother's in India working and earning a lot of money as well. And she is just kind of docile and willing to take life as is. And then you have Becky Sharp, whose mother was an opera girl and her father was a French painter. So she has a lot of skills in working the system, but she doesn't have any money. She's looked down on as like the scum of the earth. The servants in Amelia's house do not like Becky because they think that she's just conniving. That's kind of the setup. So this book is as a timeless tome. It's a big one. This one follows them as they live their lives in different ways. So Amelia meets this man named George, and she's basically engaged to him at the beginning, and it follows her relationship with potentials with him, all the different people in her life that have problems, or the different people in her life who have solutions to those problems. And then you also have Becky Sharp's side where she becomes a governess with the Crawley family, and all of her ventures from there. Now, I think this book has a lot to say. It's a satire. It has a lot to say about society, how we view people, how we talk to people, and how we treat people considering their stature or wealth. Even though it's a satire about 1800s England, it is actually really applicable, I think, today to certain ways that we treat people, or we view people and view victims in situations, or view the attackers in certain situations. So I really recommend this one. I don't want to go into too much more detail, but if you want to stick around and hear spoilers, feel free to do so. Or if you know the plot, please stick around because I'd love to discuss these with you in detail. So for the first of this one I think is really interesting with how it sets up the names of the people in this book. So William Thackery did a great job of talking about the names and treating those names as a way to tell the story. So the Crawleys are always trying to crawl to the top of power. Becky Sharp is very intelligent. And Amelia Sedley doesn't exactly sound very ambitious, to say the least. So it's very interesting how they all portray their name. I also really think that it's an interesting character development of Becky Sharp, how she is very conniving and ambitious when it comes to her marriages, to her people, or her attempted marriages, however you want to look at it that way. It's an interesting dynamic because these two women are pitted against each other for the whole book. You have Becky, who is using men to no end. She is using Roden, who she marries, but she wishes she had married the father because, you know, she would have been queen like Lady Crawley instead of, you know, waiting for it to be Lady Crawley. And that's very cunning and very true to Becky's nature. You also have her in relationships with different generals and different soldiers, and basically making every man in the room want to cheat on their wife with her because she's just so seducting. She's such a seductress. And then you have Amelia, who is loyal to George, and George is not loyal to Amelia. He only sticks around because his best friend Jabbin makes him, basically. And so George tries to actually run away with Becky, and it's interesting that Amelia doesn't even care. Like, she does care, but she doesn't hold it against Becky forever. She's very forgiving and very docile about it all, when Becky has basically tried to ruin her life. It's also, I found very interesting about the fact that Becky is very much an awful mother. She becomes a mother to Roden Jr., and she does not care one whiff about this child. She only cared about him because it guaranteed her money. And suddenly she just doesn't care. She wants to party, and then what's left of child rearing is left to her husband, who adores their son. But then you have Amelia, who is pregnant when George dies, and she lives with her parents, and then she has her own son, George Jr., who becomes very much like his father and not treating people well. Everyone tends to dislike Georgie. He can have a kind heart, but he's very much a spoiled brat like his dad was. And Amelia's dedicated to him so much so that she will turn on anyone who stands in the way of George's, or Georgie as they call him, Georgie's happiness. And it's a very interesting dynamic of these two boys who are raised in very different homes and with very different mothers. And their parents are very opposite to each other. You also have the relationship between Amelia and her brother Joss, as well as him and Joss and her parents, as they have a very tumultuous relationship when they start to lose the money and they become broke, and Joss has to support the whole family. It had a very interesting talk about money and how people suddenly are raised in estimation or lowered in estimation depending on the view of money. Becky, for example, is very discussed and very popular because she has the appearance of money, even though she does not have it. And then Amelia, who does not have much money, but she has a little, is very much looked down on by all the women because the men love her without any fault of her own. However, she does not have money, which makes it even worse. So money plays a lot into this book and a lot into how people are perceived. It also is interesting with Joss because Becky tried to seduce him in the beginning, and then in the end they are reunited and he basically falls into the trap right again. He is one of those characters who just sees a pretty face and that's all he knows about, and that's all he cares about. So it's interesting how all of these relationships take place and how they symbolize the different women and how they are in society. And I think it's also interesting to look at that in the light of Victorian society and what the women should have been like to begin with. Now in this book there are no heroes, so that's something else about it. However, I want to talk a lot about also William Jabbin, who he is probably the only hero in the book if you want to call anyone a hero. He is the best friend to George who makes George marry Amelia. He is a very keen person. He knows exactly that he should not trust Becky or her husband Roden at all. He knows that they are not good people. And then he also knows that Joss is kind of a bumbling idiot sometimes, especially when it comes to Becky Sharp. So it's just a very interesting character because he's always been in love with Amelia, and yet he's pushing for Amelia's happiness even though he knows those people aren't good for Amelia. At the end, I really liked how he started to stand up for his own rights and his own happiness, but he also started to standing up to Amelia, being like, you are wrong about Becky. You are wrong about your brother. You are wrong about this. And it's a very interesting tell on it, especially when how he comes into Amelia's and Georgie's life, that suddenly Georgie becomes a better person because he has a better role model in his life. So I think Jabbin is definitely the hero of the book if you want to deem anyone of hero status. But it's very sad in some ways how everyone just kind of ends where they begin. No one has a character arc. I really did enjoy that though, how no one really grows. And that's part of, some people just never grow. You have Becky, who is always conniving, always using her money, always using her feminine wills to get wherever she wants. You have Amelia, who is always docile and bowing to the person who she cares most about in the world for his or her opinion. And then you have the men in their lives. You have Jabbin, who is married to Amelia, and they have a child together, and he's very much leading the home. He's the leader, he knows exactly what should happen, and that hasn't changed. He's always been that way. Then you also have Joss, who eventually dies at the end, and he gives all his money to Becky, very much like he always has been, in giving up everything he can. You have Rawdon, who I feel like is also has a bit of a character arc, as he who married Becky in the beginning, or in the middle of this book, he has somewhat of a character arc because he realizes that his wife has been playing him. He realizes that he is not important to her at all, and she'd much rather have generals and lords looking after her, or hanging out with her, or going to dinner with her, than her own husband. And he's literally only there for arm candy, or so she can get into certain rooms or parties. But then eventually she doesn't even need him anymore, and he's dropped like a hot potato. So he sees his wife's duplicity, and he lives on his own. He's sent away to another post because his wife connived against him with, and it's an interesting way to do this because I feel like Rawdon deserved better. Even though he himself was not a great person, he did deserve better than his lonely, untimely death. However, it fits him because he did make that bed, so he does get to lie in it. And I really feel bad for his son, but I'm also happy for his son because his son ends up being basically adopted by his aunt and uncle. Rawdon Jr. is adopted by his aunt and uncle because Becky doesn't care one whiff about him. And so he grows up with his cousins, and he learns from them how to be the future Lord Crawley. And he becomes very humble. He has his aunt who is very honest and caring, but she doesn't just cave all the time. She's a very good woman. And it's interesting that under that care, he develops so much. He grows in so many ways, and he really becomes someone who you can think will be a good Lord Crawley one day. So I don't want to go into too long of a video because I do want to just discuss this, and we'll talk about it down in the comments, anything you thought of this book. I do really recommend it, even if you haven't read it and you just wanted to know the spoilers. Please pick it up. It is quite a long one, but I really enjoyed it, and I think it's quite good on the read, even though I knew what it was like before I read it because I actually watched the miniseries. So that is my Timeless Tome Vanity Fair edition. Thank you so much for watching. I hope this is the start to a really great, successful reading year of big classics for me. I hope you join in and read Anna Karenina with me. If not, you can totally wait until my next books come out, or please leave me recommendations down below in the comments along with your thoughts on Vanity Fair. If you love it, if you hate it, what parts you like or dislike. Also, anything that just stands out to you, because it's so full of symbolism with the names and the places and the events in the book. But I wanted to just get into details. Like, what do you think about certain characters and certain things? Please let me know down below, and I will see you again tomorrow for another day of Bookmas. Bye for now.